So for a while, like in the early 90s, I was the coolest motherfucker ever because I was like, I know him as Jaleel.
Oh,
like,
shit.
That's Urkel. And I'm like, and his favorite ice cream is cookies and cream. Now fuck with me.
And when I ask him how he's doing, he's like, yeah, I'm doing good.
Yeah. Or he'll be like, not great, really. Because he's honest.
We just have that kind of relationship. It's real open and honest.
Yeah, keep laughing at Urkel or whatever you call him.
Oh, you call him Stefan? Cool.
The government growing babies. Microchips in your anus. All koala bears are racist. The ozone layer owes me money. Martians invented turkey stuffing. Y'all can't tell me nothing.
All right, there it is. Yep, there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another phenomenal episode of My Mama Told Me, the podcast where we dive deep into the pockets of black conspiracy theories, and we finally work to prove that Geraldo Faldo is the greatest character actor of all time. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It's not up for debate. You want to talk about cancel culture? What the fuck happened to Waldo? White people, you devils, you evil motherfuckers, that you wouldn't hire this brave black man who was doing goofy nigga shit back in the 90s when goofy niggas weren't even cool yet. This motherfucker had a voice. He had real potential, and you stole that from him. I watched a video of him today. He's old and gray and disappointing to look at, and he didn't have to be that way. He could have been our silly ass Denzel Washington, but you stole that from us. I'll never fucking forgive you, you evil motherfuckers. Anyway, I'm your host, Langston Kerman, coming in pretty regular this time. That honestly is usually how I start most episodes. I come in hot. I'm excited to be here. Our guest today, I don't know how he feels about Geraldo Faldo. He's smoking weed already, so I gotta presume he fucks with Waldo pretty hard. He's hilarious. He runs an amazing podcast that I enjoy very much called the Daily Zeitgeist, and he runs an even cooler podcast that I've been hearing about. It's called 420 Day Fiance. It's all about 90 Day Fiance, a show that I love dearly. I hold it close to my heart. You're gonna love him. Please give it up for Miles Gray, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, I fuck heavy with Waldo Faldo. I'm a huge Family Matters fan.
Hell yeah.
My grandparents regularly were extras on the show.
Really?
Yeah.
This is true.
Oh, I got stories for you. So my grandparents were like if you saw old black people in the background of films, it was my grandparents.
Whoa.
Deep impact. When Blair Underwood is like looking on the screen back to Earth, my grandparents are in the background.
Yo.
Jerry Maguire, when Cuba Gooding Jr. gets hurt in the scene and Regina King's like, oh my God, she's holding on to my grandmother. And then my grandfather, after when he gets up, he's like, yeah, get up. That's us, baby.
Dog, that's crazy.
Yeah.
You come from like, you're like a prince. You're like
background royalty, baby.
Holy shit, you're the Meghan Markle of fucking background actors. This is insane.
And I have the exact same birthday as Prince Harry. So yeah, we got something going right
Whoa.
there. But yeah, they used to be on Family Matters a lot, and they had a relationship with Jaleel. And I used to kick it with Jaleel White at my grandparents' house because he just like was kind of, that he just was like, oh, these people are cool, and kind of became surrogate sort of family members to him.
And he was like a cool dude.
Yeah, he was a really nice guy. Yeah,
that's fucking tight. I take a lot of, or at least personally, I always take solace in knowing that certain people ended up just being nice at the end of it. Because I know, at least from the rumors that I've heard, that the adults on that show actually were super dicks to the kids. And that's part of what the kerfuffle was in all of it, because it originally was bought as a and look at us, we're getting into conspiracy already.
Right.
It originally was sold as like a black family show, right?
Right.
And then it didn't do that well as a black family show, but then they introduced Urkel, and it fucking blew up. And all these adult actors who would spend their lives like building careers as legitimate professionals were getting pissed that this 12-year-old was like coming in and going, yeah, and they were, losing their credits because of it.
Oh, you hate to see it.
Yeah, no, I mean,
What are you getting into?
in retrospect, if I'm 45 and some dork pulls up his pants real high and steals my job, I'd be pretty pissed too.
And you're like, all he said was, "Did I do that?"
Yeah.
But you know what? Yes, he did. He
did do that. And he did it every episode for about 7 or 8 seasons.
Yeah.
So, all right, we can't dick around anymore. As charming as these stories are, we have a hell of a conspiracy to get into. And it's an exciting one because this conspiracy theory, this whole episode is really our 420 episode. We're really connecting it, connecting the dots here and really making it a themed episode. This is our big themed one. But you came to us with a conspiracy theory that said, my mama told me
drug-free is the way to be.
Tell me a little bit about that. How much are you sold on that idea?
In the beginning, I was sold up until I think probably I saw Half Baked.
Whoa.
I was like, I spoke at my DARE graduation.
I'm sorry. I mean? Let's rewind here because that implies a couple things. Number one, you were a hell of a snitch. But number two, DARE graduation? You were attending DARE classes?
No, so the DARE program culminated with like a certificate ceremony and a t-shirt. That's when you got this shirt and that's when you got the whatever. I'm learning how to be a cop certificate.
Yeah. I actually think their utility belts are pretty cool.
I think, honestly, it was more like an expression of me adapting to whatever environment I was in. Because the school I went to, I was one of the few people, kids of color. I'm Black and Japanese. There was maybe 2 other Black kids and 2 other Asian kids and like a couple, it was, but mostly white Lutheran school. So it was very religious. But I was just very quickly was good at adapting to be like, okay, so this is what they like. Or whatever. This is how many. This is a skill that many people have to have navigating these spaces of okay, where am I? Watch me be. I'll kill this version of however the fuck y'all are acting. So when the Officer Charles shows up, I'm like, because I was all about getting good grades too. So I was always overachieving and shit. So I was like, oh, watch me be a fucking young DEA agent in the making.
Watch me 21 Jump Street the shit out of this.
Exactly. I'm bringing my dad's weed I found. I'm like, officer, I found this at my house. Maybe you should talk to my dad. But nah, I never did that. But yeah, so initially, yes, I definitely bought the propaganda for sure.
Okay, so you were all in on DARE, as was I. Let me not throw you under the bus completely. I similarly, the DARE program showed up at our school, and we were asked to make a song, a DARE for a big DARE conference where each class was meant to perform a song. And me and my best friend Michael wrote a parody of that Blackstreet song. I can't fucking even think of it.
No Diggity?
Yeah, yep, there you go. No Diggity. We wrote a parody of No Diggity that was basically an anti-drug No Diggity, and then performed that in front of literally hundreds of other children. So, yeah, I bought in. I was with you.
Oh, my, hold on. What were the lyrics? I like how you're abstaining. No diggity.
I feel like it was no diggity, no drugs. We were in 4th grade, so we weren't doing great lyric work.
But yeah,
it was solid.
Yeah.
I'd give it a C+, even in retrospect.
It's easy. At least you went no diggity, no doubt to no diggity, no drugs.
Yep,
That's
exactly.
Easy. Yeah, at least it's D. Yeah. I
and we taught all the white kids in school, the little, this joint, the little dance and shit. And we had them doing the thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Turning up for DARE.
Turning up for DARE. We were thotting for DARE.
Yeah.
So I get it. At what point? So you're saying you watch Half Baked. And is it just because Half Baked is so funny that you're like, fuck it, I don't want to, I don't believe in this anymore?
Yeah, it was just like, oh fuck yeah, that's how I'm trying to live.
Hell yeah.
I was like, that's the life. That is the lifestyle,
right?
Being with your friends, smoking, laughing, eating, and you're and going through puberty and shit. So you're like, yeah, bro, let's eat a fucking huge thing of cheese puffs or whatever. So it was just it sort of, I don't know, it was a very easy reflection back to me of what I was already living, except without the added benefit of weed.
So you're like, I could be a giggly motherfucker for the rest of my life as these adult men are doing. So yeah, if weed allows that, I'm all in.
Absolutely. And I was talking, and so it's funny, like in the year before I actually smoked weed, I talked like I was smoking weed. You know, like I was like warming my mind up for it, like trying to melt away the words of Officer Charles.
Sure.
And other people, because my family was never really giving me that like anti-drug shit. Like when I started smoking weed, my dad was like, "Oh, you just started smoking weed?" He thought I had been smoking weed a long time before that.
Oh, so they didn't. Not only were they not giving you anti-drug shit, they didn't give a fuck. They were really. Sort of like, "Hey, whatever makes you happy, go crazy."
Yeah, like my mom's a film critic. You know, she's from Japan, so she very like weed is not really the thing there at all.
Right.
So she wasn't ever. She was definitely like. She definitely said like, don't do drugs. Don't do drugs. Don't do drugs.
Right.
But my dad is an artist, so he's trippy. And I think the biggest benefit I had was my dad's honesty growing up. So if I asked him about it, he would just tell me straight up. Like he didn't fucking sugarcoat anything, no matter how old I was. Yeah. Like I remember the first time I saw like a unhoused person, I said, like, what? Why do these people not have anywhere to live? He said, Ronald Reagan. And I was fucking 5.
And I'll be honest, your dad was correct. He could have said that about most things, and he would have been correct.
Right, 100%.
Ronald Reagan truly is the source of a lot of problems in this country.
Right, exactly. So I think but you know, like that was his whole style. So when it came to like drugs and things, he would just be like, "Oh yeah, like this, weed is, makes everything, you'll just be laughing, have a good time."
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I started smoking where I, would talk about it. And that was much later. But yeah, Half Baked it just resonated. I was like, it's video games. I loved it was just going to make everything better. And like the older, cousins, relatives in my life who were smoking and I looked up to just made it very easy for that, that to happen.
Well, there's a couple things that I want to ask because I think that this is super interesting. So you get into drugs or at least smoking weed, whatever. Is there a point where you find yourself starting to question that, or are you just 100% in, you never go back to your former dare self?
Oh yeah, I never gave a fuck after that. It was because, I was just like, it was all performative. That was me just adapting to a situation where the dominating opinion was drugs are bad.
Right.
Within that construct, I was just, trying to flourish within that because everything just felt like adapting to some situation. So once I realized that wasn't who I was, or like I didn't need that, or like I guess the larger community I was trying to be a part of was not that.
Yeah.
It was easy to just be like, oh yeah, I'm leaving that shit behind, right?
Right. So with that, then, is there a point in which, especially as like a black person in this country, where weed becomes in any way like a danger in your life, where like you get in trouble for the shit, where it gets criminalized in your little local community? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Did that dissuade me, you're saying?
Or did you have any like actual like negative experiences in relation to weed?
I mean, yeah. Luckily, I would say this, my ratios were right when I intersected with the cops. Meaning there were enough white people around me that it prevented me from actually facing the fucked up legal system. So I'm privileged in that sense.
You had a few linemen, white linemen, to sort of
I had
like
a
take those
fullback
hits
just
for you.
Mike Allstott just coming through, blowing it up for me, and I'm work done. Like, bow, like thank you, sir. I need to get out of here. Yeah, he's got a fucking quarter pound on him. Run, hop over the fence at this house party, which I would do. Yeah, because I would start. I was serving and shit in high school, and that was like I really got into it. I really felt like, and part of that was probably me trying to, unfortunately, like some internalized white supremacy of like, well, like I am the dude with drugs. I'm the black kid. So I got that. These kids are fucking square. So I have weed and shit.
Right.
And I think that definitely fed into it on some level for sure. But it also got me a lot of social cred too, for just being like, oh, he's got weed. Like he's got, drugs or whatever.
Yeah, I always think
yeah.
that's it's a weird pitfall for black kids in predominantly white spaces of like trying to adopt in a weird way the stereotypes that don't even necessarily belong to us in that moment.
No.
It's just some shit we've seen that's associated with black people.
Yeah.
And you try to make it your own. And then with that comes a type of like negative or trouble or whatever the fuck that follows it that you didn't even necessarily need in your life. You would have been straight.
Absolutely. And I think also being biracial does something to that too, because I'm Japanese and I'm black and I'm black American. And, there's just a lot of, I'm looking in so many directions constantly. And I think especially in your adolescence, when you have absolute, it's pure chaos from an identity standpoint.
Yeah.
It allows for, just kind of being sort of malleable in that way. And then over time, I got over that shit. But yeah, I mean, like, there were plenty of times there, got hassled when I didn't have weed. And thank God I didn't. And it was just me and a couple other, like black kids that thank God nothing was happening then.
Right.
But then other times I would just be finishing. I was just talking to one of my friends from high school who's a white guy. We were smoking weed in his Trailblazer, listening to fucking like Stankonia or some shit. And it was like me and two other kids. We just faced a blunt. And right as we exhaled and threw the fucking butt out the window, a cop car pulled up and just puts the lights on us. And we're like, fuck. And I had weed on me.
Yeah.
Luckily, I was in the back seat with, again, my offensive line in the front seat in the form of two privileged ass white guys who were like, the cops came up and they're like, what's going on, guys? You guys smoking pot? We're getting complaints here. And they're like, yeah, we'll be honest. Yeah, we were just smoking it. And they were like, where's it at? We're like, this is going to sound wild, but we literally just finished smoking.
Jesus Christ.
And they're like, huh. And he's just like, he looked at the driver, said, and my other homie in the front, he said, your parents know that you guys are doing this? And they're both like, yeah. Like talking this shit back to the cop. And I was like, oh my God. They're like, yeah, they do.
It's it's the Chappelle bit, like brought to life.
Right. And I was like, the fuck? You just talk to them like they're your stepdad. The fuck is that? And they're like, yeah, they know. And then the cop was like, because of that, he was like, shh, we'll go up DeSoto because we don't go up there. And gave them like
Jesus
a tip.
Christ.
And I was just like, okay. And I'm the one holding the fucking weed. So it was just fucking, yeah. There's been a lot of wild things, to say the least, in terms of like, identity and what that means or doesn't mean in those situations.
That's fucking nuts. You hear the comedy of it all, but it is like fucking crazy that they never for a second looked in that backseat and thought like, oh, we might be putting Miles in a little bit of danger. Maybe we'll be chill and be like, no, we're not. We'll keep it moving, officer. Any of that shit. They were like, yeah, man, we smoke weed. It tastes good in our mouths and it makes us feel silly.
And I just fucking blew a whole blunt's worth of smoke up your mama's asshole, man. What? And you're like, please, man. Like,
and he's like, take it up the street. My mother likes it up there better.
Yeah.
It's like what? All right.
How? Like, he looked at me in my eye and somehow he still it was the power of your whiteness that saved us.
Well, they do believe in one of the good ones, and apparently that was enough for them to feel like you were in fact that. Yeah,
exactly. The ratios were white enough.
The ratios were in your favor that day. Yeah. So you are now a total advocate for weed. And for people
drug
in
use
in general. Are you one of these people? Because I have talked to a few people, some of whom are doctors, who believe that we should just legalize everything. That like everything should just become legal and like whatever people do, they do and what be it will. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, I think obviously the criminalization of drugs has just led to this, carceral system that is absolutely unnecessary. So I think not only to just reduce that kind of, criminality, also having a society where like, yeah, you can do that, but also it has to be like, you can't just have that and also not have support systems, because I think right now it's very hard for people who are really on drugs or addicted to them to get the help they need truly, and to be able to enter a society where once they feel able enough, they can do whatever they need to. So yeah, I mean, you look at a lot of the countries that have decriminalized their drugs, and they don't fall into these pitfalls. Like, I mean, look what happened Portugal.
Right.
Absolute mess. It isn't. It isn't.
Yeah.
And yes, people are they're illegal and they still do drugs. So I don't think of this idea that, now that it's legal, now everyone's going to start, slamming heroin on the fucking subway. Like, come on. No.
Yeah, I've never once saw somebody like leaned over from some like pills and thought like, man, I'm trying to try that shit. Like, truly, I think there's just something innate in some of us that are like, fuck it, I want to try this, and I think I can get around it, or it won't affect me the way that it affects other people. And some of us are just little scaredy cats and aren't gonna ever take it that far. And I think I fall closer to the latter than the former. You know what I mean?
I'm definitely an explorer. Like, I went through a phase where I was like trying to get as fucked up as possible to know like what the fucking limits were, because it just, at a certain point, like I started looking at the musicians, I was like, oh, they're all getting fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, it's like this weird, I'm reflecting some kind of concept of a celebrity back into my own life and shit. But also I think, I was also like, again, chaos mentally, emotionally.
Sure.
So it was going to be easy to be like, oh, let's get fucking, just off our faces and watch the Korn Unplugged DVD. Like,
see, my favorite rapper growing up was Andre 3000, and that motherfucker was vegan by the time I was like 8. So I was like, as long as I can be like this weirdo who doesn't drink or smoke or do any of that, I'll be cool.
For me, Method Man, Redman, DMX were some of my favorite rappers.
Yeah.
And when that movie Backstage came out, that documentary about the Hard Knock Life tour,
dog, one of the wildest things I ever saw in my youth.
Yeah, I was like, we're smoking all the goddamn time now.
But also, like, just dudes getting their dick sucked and then doing like full interviews afterwards.
Yeah,
it was just
let's go in this bathroom stall, and you're like, what the fuck is this shit? So, yeah, I think there was a lot of things like that, too, that, again, the people who I idolized, blunt smoking was the norm.
Yeah.
So that also became the norm for me. Like, people love, these kids now, they love fucking Yeezy. So they'll just dabble in, right-wing politics and big sweatshirts. But for me, I was like golden era hip-hop, where it's all like Mobb Deep and, Raucous Records type New Yorkers, where it's all smoking blunts and shit. Like,
yeah.
This is it.
Right.
And California too is just mad weed, but
I feel like I would be doing us a disservice if I don't circle this back to the larger premise of this episode and really our podcast as a whole, and talk a little bit about race. So I'm curious to know where you think some of the fear around drugs and drug culture comes from in relation to Black culture and the Black community. Like, I think the anti-drug campaign for a while was obviously built by white people, but certainly championed in some ways by older Black people. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of that.
I mean, I think, personally growing up and just anecdotally from my relatives, like my dad, grandfather, it was always just about intersecting with police.
Mm-hmm.
That had to be avoided at all costs.
Yeah.
At all costs. Don't want to be you just don't want to have to fucking encounter the police.
Right.
So that did create a very healthy fear in me when I was, had drugs on me and was trying to live a little outrageous and shit like that. I'll just say, culturally within my family, there was an openness with drugs.
Yeah.
Or, because honestly, drugs are unfortunately another form of upward mobility for some people.
Oh,
so
say more.
You know what I mean? When you're in a community that is sort of resource strapped, that unfortunately, your financial recourse is having to sell drugs. And things like that. And I think just culturally having my understanding what Black people were up against, it was sort of like, I mean, that's people are do that shit to survive. It's fucked up, but it was more like, I mean, life is fucked up.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're saying is really interesting, especially just the idea that it's not often, when I talk to Black people about it, it's not often us having like this active fear of the drug themselves, but
Yeah.
more the punitive
Mm-hmm.
correlations that come with those drugs. So
Right.
I'm not afraid of fucking coke. I'm afraid of getting caught with coke
Right.
and that being the thing that ruins my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very different, I think, relationship than our white counterparts often have in
100%.
relation to those drugs.
Because I think the privilege there is they're the customer, they're the end user to enhance their lifestyle.
Mhm.
Where rather being, again, like your only financial recourse as a Black person or any person of color in this country, like that's what it is. I'm not doing this because I want to, but for me to make the kind of money that seems like it's on par with someone who's college educated,
Mhm.
this is a route to that. And I think acknowledging that or being able to have the empathy around that is the difference between being like, oh my God, could someone sell? Oh, it's so disgusting. And being like, y'all don't really get what it actually means to sell drugs for a living.
Yeah, and I do think that that's part of what's always been misunderstood in the way that hip hop, at least in its former shape, used to sort of do with drugs and drug sales and all that shit.
Right.
Jay-Z wasn't being like, nigga, I love selling drugs. It's my favorite thing in the world. He's saying like, yo, this is what I did to now get to a lifestyle that I love and that I don't want to lose. And while, obviously there are a bunch of moral conundrums cooked into the choices that happen there, it's not a dude being like, I can't wait to destroy my community. No. It's a different energy than that.
Right. It's like, this is the set of resources that I have to work with. Other people, it's generations of going to Ivy League schools.
Yes.
And you can fast track your way to your 6-figure, 7-figure income like that.
Right.
If you're actually looking at what it means to live in this, like a place of oppression, you're not part of the hegemonic class, then it's a much different route that way.
Yeah. And and in a lot of ways, it's no different than what we see with like the justification that all these billionaires and these super millionaires make with their own like fucked up corporations, right? They're not going like, I love kicking people out of their housing, tricking them out of the comfort of their homes. They're just like, hey man, I wanted a new apartment building and I bought it. If some people got kicked the fuck out, that's on them.
They're like, also, you're kind of looking too close. To me, that's just a building. I'm not looking at the motherfuckers inside there. That's a building and that's a check. And you're like, why are you looking so close?
Wait, there were people in there? I wasn't even over there.
No. You buy a property for the passive income. I don't know the fuck with a tenant. That's why you have a management company.
Right.
Come on now.
I didn't kick anyone out. I hired a person to kick someone out.
Exactly.
That's a different energy.
If you want to be broke, keep zooming in. Keep zooming in.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with more My Mama Told Me and more Miles Gray. And we are back.
Oh, shit.
This what I feel like. Yeah. Laughing to the bank like ha 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 ha.
Yep, there it is. We're back. It's our longest drop yet. We're still here with Miles Gray. We're still talking about the dangers and the joys of enjoying drugs and the possible pitfalls that the evil white man has cooked into that experience.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'd love to kick into some of this research with you. Mm-hmm. We have a fair amount of research that I'd love to talk about with you. And before we get into it, I want to preface it a little bit that Obviously, there are plenty of podcasts out in the world, and this is more for the listeners than you, Miles, but there are plenty of podcasts out there for you, dear listener, that can walk you through all the careful specifics about the U.S. government and how they bought tons and tons of cocaine as a secret tool for helping to fund foreign wars. And then that led to a surplus of cocaine in America, which then led to the crack epidemic, which ultimately landed millions of black men and women in jails, right? Like, podcasts do that shit already. I am not Henry Louis Gates. I don't give a fuck that much to give you the history lesson. Instead, what I think would be more exciting is for us to dig into some of the propaganda related to drugs and drug paraphernalia that sort of shape the way that we understand the world.
Sure.
Hell
I'm
yeah.
ready.
So, one of the things that I thought was particularly interesting is that I did not know this, was that weed up until 1937 was totally legal in the United States. I had no idea.
Yeah. Okay. Was it like through prescription or something first? Was like the first restriction they had, and then it became fully prohibited? And okay.
So not only was it, yes, you're absolutely correct. It was through prescription, but it wasn't just that like, oh, they prescribed you some weed. Cannabis, as it was formerly mainly known as, cannabis was in almost every fucking drug. That like it was just an ingredient that they included, the same way fucking saturated fat is just a guarantee in everything. You were going to have a little weed in there. Yeah, it was high fructose corn syrup, but it was cannabis at the time.
Or in this case, maybe MSG, because like it gives a little flavor, like rather, like they're like, bro, it's not going to hit unless you got weed in there.
Yeah, you got to have a little bit of weed. A little
MSG, baby.
Yeah, so it's in every drug you can buy, over the counter, under the counter. All the drugs have weed in it until the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. And part of the reason that they say that this Marijuana Tax Act happened is not because they realized that weed was dangerous, but because there were other competing drugs that sort of offered the same experience of healing that cannabis could offer. And those companies pushed with the government to basically get weed out of competition. They didn't want weed, like cannabis, to be the thing. So they pushed themselves forward and paid off government officials to make marijuana now a taxable offense.
Okay. This is kind of like the hemp conspiracy, essentially.
Tell me more.
This is more to deal with. Well, there's this. This is something actually I just fucking had to blow my own mind, because Jack Herrera wrote that book, like The Emperor Has No Clothes or whatever it's called. It was sort of a seminal weed text talking about the hemp conspiracy. Was essentially saying that the prohibition of cannabis was because of DuPont and other companies trying to create nylon or synthetic fabrics, and they had just figured out how to separate hemp and the fibers and all that shit. But actually, it turns out that wasn't true.
Oh,
I thought that shit was true for the longest time, because the sort of 3 points that he lays out are the main ones. Is sort of that Andrew Mellon, who was I think the Secretary of the Treasury, directed somebody because he had a stake in a specific company that was from DuPont or whatever. That's why he wanted this to happen, which wasn't really true. A lot of historians can't say that he had that sort of financial connection.
Right.
So that was dubious. And just the other things were just sort of a lot of historians who focused on how these people invested their money. The money doesn't quite add up the way they said it does. Because they also said Hearst had a big interest as well because they owned timber, but Hearst was actually in a lot of debt at the time. So
there wasn't a financial had the capital to be able to make this
although
happen.
of course he helped with the propaganda aspect, but that financial connection wasn't there. Really, what it boils down to, it's all this other shit. It was just racism.
There you go. And
you know what I mean?
I'm so glad you said that.
But this white guy writes the book, and it's man, because DuPont is fucking wants the hemp. But nah, man, it's just fucking racism.
The more important element of this Marijuana Tax Act that happens, and I think you're putting it perfectly, is that marijuana was not what they originally called it. They called it cannabis. But then after the Mexican Revolution, there's this massive influx of Mexican people coming into the country, mainly in like Texas, Louisiana, all these southern states. And so they want to start controlling that population. And they introduce a bunch of propaganda suggesting that cannabis causes people of color to go crazy, specifically Mexicans, to be violent and dangerous. And so part of it is them just trying to control this population. So now they start telling people the thing that they've been enjoying in every drug that they've had up to this point is marijuana, and marijuana fucking makes you go nuts.
Mm-hmm. And like, yeah, all kinds of ridiculous stories about people losing their minds, killing their family with a hatchet. Because I'm pretty sure the first drug arrests in California were of Mexicans in LA in 1914 or something like that. So it's all based on oppressing people of color with whatever, sensational thing they can pair with the news. And at that time, it would be that, or, protecting the virtue of white womanhood.
Yes, you got to keep those white pussies safe because these Mexicans, they could do horrible things to these white pussies if you don't control them and beat the shit out of them.
You don't want that.
You don't want that. Folks at home, you don't want that. This is super interesting for me, is the exact same playbook that they used with opium and Chinese people. That when there was a massive influx of Chinese people in this country, they outlawed opium under the same premise that opium makes you go crazy and it makes you do all this violent, dangerous shit. And it was just a way of cracking down on a bunch of Chinese people and putting them in prisons or kicking them out of the country.
Yeah. And because the first drug laws were against opium to target Chinese people. And like the whole thing was sort of known that it was done for that reason, not really because out of a public benefit, but as a way just to fucking, put the brakes on this immigrant community.
Exactly. And so this all connects, and this is the most popular work relating to anti-drug campaigns, to reefer madness. I'm sure you've heard of reefer madness. I watched it, or at least as much of it as I could stomach. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. Truly a horrible film that's not because of what it's saying. I don't give a fuck one way or the other. It's just poorly made and not enjoyable to watch in any way. But Reefer Madness, for those of you that don't know, is an hour-long film that shows how marijuana, they spelled it with an H at this point. They weren't respectful enough to Mexican people in Spanish to even spell it the way that they spell it. But marijuana is public enemy number one. The opening credits read, and this is just part of them, but the opening credits read, its first effect is sudden, violent, uncontrollable laughter. Then comes dangerous hallucinations. Space expands. Time slows down. Almost stands still. Fixed ideas come next, conjuring up monstrous extravagances, followed by emotional disturbances, the loss of all power to resist physical emotions, leading often to acts of shocking violence, ending often in incurable insanity.
Wow. Really, really. I remember, I feel like it's like one of those things I've only seen like an isolated maybe 40 seconds of, where it's like this, like one white woman was like, ha, ha, ah, it's just like looking all goofy and shit. And I'm like, I just remember seeing it and saying, nobody thinks this could be real. I mean, I'm sure back then it's different, but like, I remember thinking, what the fuck? How? We've never even seen anybody like this.
That's the wild part, is like there truly is zero evidence of people becoming murderers from this thing, that they're like, they truly want us to just believe people are manic and running the streets and chopping heads off. And that's not what it is. It's part of what they're saying is totally true. You do become very silly and sometimes not are able to control some of your like extravagances, I guess, if that's the word you want to use, but that shit ain't threatening. That's just that's just a fun time.
Yeah, they're describing like a black turnip. Can't control their extravagances. It's like, what the fuck you hating for? What the fuck does that mean? Because your shit is so dry over there.
Yes.
Look at that. Oh my God, their extravagances. Shut the fuck up.
And that is at its core so much of what this is. Be it the Chinese people that they're trying to steal opium from, the Mexican people that they're trying to steal marijuana from, ultimately leading to the black people that they're trying to steal literally everything from. Like it truly is just, y'all don't get what we're doing, and therefore you're criminalizing it because it's foreign or scary or looks more fun than you know how to have.
Right, exactly. And it's interesting. It falls into a pattern where like the first countries that had like weed prohibition are all places where white countries formerly ruled over black people.
It's weird. It's weird how that works out. Who knows?
Huh. Weird. Okay. I don't know. Maybe there's something there. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know.
Hey, that's not this podcast. Yeah. We know Henry Louis Gates. That's a different podcast.
Listen to that one. Yeah.
I will say,
wild speculation come here.
I started looking into the first sort of anti-drug campaigns, like television ad campaigns, because Reefer Madness was more of like this film that they would show in schools and shit. But apparently the first anti-drug campaign was one of the most famous ones, the Just Say No campaign from Nancy Reagan. Again, we're talking about Ronald Reagan. Yep, Nancy Reagan's the lady he laid with. It comes in the early 80s. If anybody's wondering, she also is a piece of shit. And they basically use this as a national campaign sponsored by the government as a way of monitoring the drugs flowing in and out of black communities. That's the whole deal.
Mm. Isn't it her just saying like, it's her, right? Just looking
it's
at the
her
camera
whole
and
thing.
just saying,
yeah.
Just saying, like, what the again, tired.
Yes.
That you really thought that's what, come on now. Who was it that did, was it Darren Aronofsky who did like anti-meth commercials a few years ago?
So if you're referring to the Montana Meth Project.
Yeah.
So that comes in the in the early 2000s, where basically meth, apparently Montana was so overrun with meth that this dude interjects like $500,000 or $1 million into a campaign where they make these horrifying videos that are commercial ads, basically, of like people beating the shit out of their mothers and waking up in showers with like blood all over themselves. And then at the end, it's like, hey, don't do meth. You'll end up like this. And that was like the whole ad campaign.
Yeah, those were like, what I'm saying is like, those ones fucking hit. You know what I mean? Nancy Reagan being like, just say no is like, come on. Because I remember those. I remember being like, because that was like when you had to like download a QuickTime video to show somebody
you had to earn it.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, yo, you got to see these are fucking wild.
The fucked up part, you were sitting there smoking while you're watching it. Like, ooh, this motherfucker's scary.
I'm like, see, that's why I'm not going to do meth, bro. See, this shit is for real.
So one of the things, and I'm glad you brought that up, because Nancy's campaign and most of the campaigns for like anti-drug shit throughout the 80s and 90s were hugely unsuccessful. That like they start off with these like just say no campaigns telling people to basically maintain total abstinence away from drugs, including that infamous "This is your brain on drugs" commercial. And I even found like there's a drug commercial with McGruff the crime dog where he's singing a song and playing the piano, telling people not to do drugs. There's one where the Ninja Turtles call people dorks for not if you deal drugs.
I don't want that.
No, it hurt my feelings to see that the Ninja Turtles were acting like that. And then finally, Pee Wee Herman had an ad out against crack cocaine. And apparently his dick was out the entire time. They didn't show his lower half, but he was just beating off and being like, kids, don't do crack.
Yeah. Makes you do wild shit, guys. You're like, oh, fuck.
But they basically spend all this money to get kids not to do drugs. And then all the research shows that it's completely ineffective. And so then in the early 2000s, they start to change their tune and they make it less about like just abstinence from drugs, but more about like trying to make people criminals from doing drugs. So they start getting mean about the shit,
Oh,
which
shit.
is where the Montana meth project sort of interjects itself, right?
Mm-hmm. Wow. So I like how it's saying that first starts off with a parent being like, come on, guys.
Yep.
Knock it off with the drugs, huh? Take it from me. Some fucking loser you respect. And then when they don't listen, you're like, oh, okay, so now we have to turn it up.
All right, so I got to beat your ass.
Yeah. Oh, you want to see what prison look like? Motherfucker? It's like, oh, what the fuck?
Let me see the inside of your butthole, little
Yeah,
baby.
exactly.
Like, I don't know. I'm still going to smoke weed, man.
Okay, you want to boof around? Like, what the fuck? What does that even mean?
Why are you talking like that?
You're my chemistry teacher.
So they again find out that none of this shit works. It doesn't actually make people stop doing drugs. And then finally in 2012, the national government admits that the shit doesn't work, that all the research, all the complaints, all the people identifying all of this stuff is racist are correct. And they stop doing national commercials for anti-drug campaigns. They don't exist really anymore, except there was a period during the Trump administration where he created a campaign for $400,000 that was an opioid campaign, which naturally makes sense. He was trying to save white people from themselves.
Right, exactly. It's just funny because like the war on it's so misguided because they're spending all the money in this other just vaporware when really it's about supporting people.
Yes.
To prevent drug use. It's like when like Nancy Pelosi was wearing the kente cloth in the rotunda.
Bitch, I didn't need that.
Yeah. It's like, why don't you go and actually pass some fucking laws?
Yeah.
Because that's Nancy Reagan saying, just say no.
Yeah, get off your fucking knee,
bullshit.
Nancy. You're 70 something years old. I don't need this. You're not healing anybody with this.
Exactly.
The
Do
fuck
some
up.
real shit. Do some real shit. Don't fucking pump fake with that nonsense. Just like this. And then you realize, oh, they're going to say in fucking 60 years from now, you know, it really, things moved at a pace that was really ensured horrible outcomes. This committee has determined after looking at the data. Like,
yeah,
fuck you.
Right.
And that's what it's going to be. And it's going to be such an insult. But anyway, that's what this dumb shit is. You threw your money away on fucking Big Bird telling me not to fucking smoke krills. Like,
yeah, it's exactly right. You spent all the money thinking that this was going to justify the war that you created, and it doesn't. It hasn't healed anything. And what they did find out, this Ohio State University, which I don't respect that place, but one of the things that they did, I'm a Michigan man.
Hey, I went to UCLA, right?
Yeah, I'll never forgive you either.
Well, we got ours in then.
Yeah, no, I was happy to see it. That said, one of the things that I discovered in sort of like unpacking some of this shit, Ohio State University actually did a study where they discovered that the only thing that actually worked to keep kids from doing drugs was not somebody being like, just say no, don't do drugs, all this other shit, was just showing cool, regular ass kids not doing fucking drugs. So that's when you start inserting all these commercials where it's like a cool kid and he's skateboarding, and then somebody's like, hey, you trying to hit this? And he's like, nah, dog. And then he does a fucking ollie, and everybody's like, hell yeah, I want to be like that motherfucker.
Yep. Just fucking did a grind on that handrail and then knocked the joint out the kid's mouth.
Right, but he ain't even trying to teach a lesson. He's not being a fucking dweeb about it. Nobody wants, and that's what they don't understand, is nobody wants to be a cop. We're not fucking gonna join your campaign, Nancy. We just don't. If we don't want to do it, we're not gonna do it. And if we do, bitch, you getting on your knees and being just say no or whatever it is isn't gonna stop me.
Exactly. It's just that. But yeah, they're just all they had to do was normalize kids having like agency.
Yes.
And not succumbing to peer pressure, which is like, yeah, okay, you mean teaching people, nurture it, showing them by example is what you mean. Like, again, what the fuck? Why did you have Big Bird in a knife fight in Harlem over like a fucking spider bag. What the fuck was that?
Can I tell you my absolute favorite of some of the anti-drug commercials that I found? And when I say favorite, I mean that it's the most fucked up of all of the ones that I saw. Is this one where there is this black dude, right? And he's clearly like in a gang. It's a bunch of gang shit happening around him. It's like late 80s, early 90s type shit. And there's like gang shit happening around him. And he looks at the camera and he goes, "Hey, yo, tell your parents to leave the room." And then he starts walking, right? And he's looking at the camera the whole time. He's talking to you at home, Miles.
Right.
And he says, "Tell your parents to leave the room." All right, they gone? Cool. You want to buy some drugs? You trying to get high? You trying to ruin your fucking life? And as he's walking, this is where it gets super fucked up. As he's walking, he slowly transforms into an actual snake. Like he physically transforms and his head becomes the head of a snake and his tongue starts getting long like a snake. And then at the end, he's like, "I won't sell you poison." And it's just a nigga turning into a snake. And we're not supposed to feel like this is a type of racism out in the world.
Oh, thank you so much. Again, when people don't realize how they internalize white supremacy, it's seeing commercials like that as a kid where you saw the Animorphs, the hood drug dealer version. And then you wonder why you're like, wow, I do have knee-jerk reactions. Yeah. That's what they're steady feeding people.
Yeah, nigga snake was a possibility in your head now because of this commercial.
Right. And you're trying to be like, "Oh, but I really like Michael Jordan and Whitney Houston." Also this snake. God, I don't know what to do.
My feelings are mixed.
Yeah. Which one is it?
I'll leave you. Well, we'll leave to the commercial with this. I think it's an important sort of caveat that I should have thrown in earlier, but also is just a great framing reference for anybody who sort of is in doubt about the positions of like some of our leaders and their decision making. Right? That like Ronald Reagan, besides being potentially the creator of the crack epidemic, is also a just outright racist. And for years, white America and sort of like Republicans and moderates and all these people have treated him like he wasn't that. And it's more complicated than that, whatever. But recently, in the last couple of years, they basically unpacked some tapes. They went into the vault and found some actual tapes of Reagan doing some racist shit, talking to Nixon. I don't know if you've ever heard this tape, but he's talking to Richard Nixon on the phone, and they're having a conversation about the African leaders in the UN, where he goes on a long rant describing them as monkeys and saying that they're not even comfortable yet wearing shoes, and basically complaining about the African leaders and their relationship with footwear. And Richard Nixon is having a ball of a time. He thinks it's hysterical.
God damn. I mean, makes sense that they were just yucking it up over that kind of shit.
Honestly, it was pretty funny shit. When I listened back to it, I was like, "Oh, this motherfucker got jokes," but also hurtful.
Yeah, and also to know but unfortunately, that's the lens through which our leaders govern this country.
Yes,
so many of them, and even when people talk about like, "Oh, I can't believe," like, how could Joe Biden be bad or whatever? Just think about the generation of people that you look at photos where it's a bunch of white teenagers screaming at a black student entering the high school. They're in their 70s.
Right.
Okay.
Right. They're still part of the workforce.
Yes. They are alive right now.
Yeah.
And a lot of these motherfuckers are holding office and shit and are leading companies and are running municipalities. So don't tell me people forget that so easily, just like you could, anyway.
I think you're saying exactly what they needed to hear. At its core, that's the danger of all of these campaigns. It's not that Nancy Reagan saying just say no to drugs on its surface is an evil idea. Telling children that like they should be more responsible around these sometimes dangerous substances is okay. But when you underlay that with a bunch of biases towards communities, towards colors, towards even economic positions in this country, you are almost certainly going to introduce a type of hate and prejudice and violence that can't be uncooked.
Right, exactly. And will take who knows how long to undo.
Yes.
Because people are we still to this day can see how much of a visual bias even exists for people just to merely appear, a black body in space.
We're all nigga snakes, and it's thanks to Nancy Reagan as far as I'm concerned.
Eat shit, Nancy.
We're going to take a break. We'll be back with more Miles Gray and more My Mama Told Me. And we are back.
People who were in slavery wish that they had curbside service at Applebee's.
Yeah, we're back here with more.
Oh,
more Miles Gray. More My Mama Told Me. We're still talking about these anti-drug campaigns and the dangers and violence that it creates in black communities. Did you enjoy the Don Lemon drought?
yes, I did. I mean, it's true. It's true.
You can't argue with that.
Objectively, would a slave saying no to Applebee's curbside
service? Are you fucking kidding me?
Yes. Okay, fine. Okay. Yeah, you got me, Don. See, you're so good. That's why they love you.
Those motherfuckers is a journalist. I'll tell you that right now.
Capital J.
All right, let's play a game. I have a very fun game. This is a first-time game for us. It's a brand new game that I'm calling That Nigga's a Cop.
That's the sound of the police. That's the sound of the beast.
That Nigga's a Cop. It's a fun game where I am going to actually read to you famous quotes, legendary quotes from Harry J. Anslinger, who was the director of the FBN, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, from 1930 until 1962. Famed racist, Harry J. Anslinger. I'm going to read you some of my favorite quotes that he had out in the world, and I just would love for you to unpack some of your feelings on said quotes, just whatever comes to mind after we talk them through. Sound good?
Yep, sounds great.
Hell yeah. Here's an easy one to start off with. He says, reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men.
Oh my God.
That's
the best shit I ever heard.
I love it.
That is facts. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it opens you up and you realize you can unshackle yourself from limited thinking.
Mm-hmm.
As good. Oh my God. That is so do you know when, like, what year that quote occurred?
It's somewhere between 1930 and 1962. Okay. I don't know specifically.
I can just imagine how, like, at that time, that's just such a hot selling point for your like anti-marijuana laws too. You know why? Because when they smoke it, they think they're as good as white people.
Well, you know what's funny about old Harry J. Anslinger is that he actually was so racist that even other racists were like, "Bro, chill." Like,
oh really?
Like, come on, man. Wow. Like, you gotta not that they didn't agree with his points, but he would take it out in public in a way that is like, yo, you're making it hot right now.
Yeah, we like this Applebee's, man.
Yeah. Slaves wish that they could have curbside service at Applebee's.
Hey, all right. Well, Don, it's okay when you say it.
Which, weirdly enough, was the second Harry J. Anslinger quote. Here's another fun one. There are 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the U.S., and most are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. Their satanic music, jazz, and swing result from marijuana usage. This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and any others.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. I love that. That's 100% nailed on truth, because what you don't realize is for your simple mind that all of this shit is just called charisma. Okay. And that is why the women are coming after us. Okay. And the talent that is unleashed through expression. Sure. It's not because we're repressed and tying up the fucking wearing the tightest fucking underwear to prevent erections and shit. We're out here just living, baby. Oh, I mean, it's just funny to see how it's really truly this idea of they're completely in awe of the joy that maybe these like communities of color they're looking at like live with. It's like they dance and stuff.
Yeah.
Mexicans play instruments.
Yeah.
Have a good time, and don't get me started on what's going on in Harlem. And what the hell is going on? You know, it's a weird, like it's so rife with like white insecurity. You know what I mean?
It is. And the other thing that has always bothered me about a lot of this is how much they think that we cherish white women also. And I cannot express enough how indifferent I am to like the special mixture of whatever you think white women are. It ain't that deep.
Right.
I like pussy. It ain't got nothing to do with her being white. If I'm chasing a thing, it truly is just a primal urge that, yes, maybe I need to unpack as a human being, but it ain't got nothing to do with her being special in that way because she's white.
I bet it started off with like some white dude who did not think much of his wife's looks, but to compliment her, he was like, and you see, they'll go after women like my Helen. Because this is obviously people trying to get at Helen. We all know that.
I like that.
And she's like, oh, thank you, Randall. Thank you. And then it's all fucked up.
That just adds 4 years to their marriage, is this weird backhanded compliment where he's like, I don't like her, but black women apparently would fuck her.
Yeah.
Black men will, I guess, push into her, and that's we got to stop that.
And who else could love her but me?
Me and a stupid black monkey. Who else could love this woman besides the two of us?
Who else?
All right, here's one that isn't inherently racist. He said, if the hideous monster Frankenstein came face to face with marijuana, he would drop dead of fright.
Ugh. Shut the fuck. Your tired ass Frankenstein. What the fuck? Frankenstein? That's the best you can come up with? You fucking lazy motherfucker.
Yeah.
Really? If Frankenstein met weed, he'd run away. Shut the fuck up, folks. What the fuck is that?
If Frankenstein met weed, he would say, oh, I wish you never brought me to life. Please, kill me now.
And also, what if I smoked it, though? Maybe I'd be a super monster or some shit.
If Frankenstein met weed, he would say, well, technically, I'm Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein was a doctor. Anyway, please keep that away from me. It's dangerous.
Please. And we all know how horrific Frankenstein is, right, ladies? Like, the fuck are you talking about? But again, I wonder, you just see how like lame the attacks on drugs have been over the years. Mm-hmm. It started off with people like, oh man, weed's so bad Frankenstein would be fucking shook.
Yeah.
And now we're at like, fucking whatever it is, smashing an egg over the stove and being like, these black men will turn into crack pipes that will be inserted in your children.
Yes.
Oh my God, what the fuck?
And I do think at its core, even the ability for him to humanize Frankenstein more than the humans that he is criminalizing is a different type of propaganda and violence and all the sort of like mixed messaging that, to your point, creates an environment where a bunch of young kids grow up and still have fear of people who are the same as them.
Yeah. And you have to think like all this is because of the end of slavery.
Yep.
Their plan B was, okay, well, let's just make life as hard as possible for these people at every level, whether that's housing policies, whether that's the amount of resources that are allocated to them, whether that's through education or insidious messaging through the media. This is how we'll, level the playing field, I guess.
Absolutely. I'm going to read you one more, and I'm not sure that this one's going to do anything that we haven't covered, but it's just a fun one that maybe we could just enjoy on the way out of this bad boy. This last one says, no one knows when he places a marijuana cigarette to his lips, whether he will become a joyous reveler in musical heaven, a mad, incessant, calm philosopher, or a murderer. No one knows.
No one knows. Or all of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know? That's kind of what's cool. You know what I mean? It's all, but see, that's what's beautiful about it. It's all about what you bring to it, baby. You know what I mean?
I like that. And I do think
Yeah.
that's a good thing to be sending our listeners off with. It is all about what you bring to it.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have some, unchecked baggage, so to speak,
Yep.
maybe check that at the counter before boarding your flight.
Check them bags.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be weighed down with all them bags, as Erykah Badu said.
Oh, bag lady, what you doing with all them bags? Cut it
Yeah.
out. You got to get
Exactly.
rid of those bags, and then you can
Please.
enjoy all the heroin and cocaine and methamphetamine
Exactly.
that you feel comfortable enjoying.
And if you do it, it's just because you fuck with it.
Mhm.
And there's nothing.
And if it kills you,
that's it.
that's on you, you stupid bitch. You should have
No empathy. No empathy here. No empathy here, folks.
no empathy, but a lot of care. And that's, I
Yep.
think, the best way to end this episode. Miles, we did it. We did the thing. Could you tell the kind folks at home where they can find you, what cool shit you have going on?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Miles of Gray. And also, Daily Zeitgeist is the daily political, cultural, comedy, whatever show, just talking whatever's being talked about. Langston, you've been on twice now?
Yeah, and it's always a
Yeah.
great time. You get to talk about actual stuff that's happening in the world, but you also get to laugh about it and not just sort of pretend like it's funny, but be real serious about it. It's nice.
No. You gotta be able to laugh at this shit. That's the only way you can be engaged with the news.
Yeah.
These days. And also 420 Day Fiance. If you like 90 Day Fiance and you like weed and you want to, talk about white savior behavior, check out 420 Day Fiance, because that's all we do over there.
I love it. Please listen to both of Miles's podcasts. Follow him. And as always, you can follow me at Langston Kerman, and you can send us drops or notes or just sweet little somethings, whatever it feels good to you. It can be evil little somethings. I don't give a shit to mymommapod@gmail.com. And all right, bye, bitch.
Government growing babies. Microchips in your anus. All koala bears are racist. The ozone layer owes me money.